Good day. I'm Tiffany Rothman at 90211. We're back to season 3 with my wonderful and amazing co-host, Chris Sloan. Hello, Chris.
Welcome to season 3, Tiffany. Here we are. Who would have thought we would have a season 3?
Yes, here we are. So today I would like to discuss about domestic violence. Do you know that every 100 victims, 30 of them are men?
So 30% of domestic violence occurs with men, meaning they're the ones receiving the domestic violence.
Exactly.
3 out of 10 men
Well,
or
yeah,
boys or what have you.
because the thing is, as you know, with the way men build, they don't get physically as damaged as women.
So it's more emotional for men.
Yes, but that doesn't mean it helps. You know what I mean? Like we talk about about certain film, but when I was a volunteer at an organization in New York, I heard a story like when a man and there was a man who was abused by his successful executive wife, and he's a physician. He's not a complete loser whatsoever. And somehow, when it was over, it took him 7 years to recover. And there's a lady who told me that she was in a domestic violence marriage to a very successful artist, and she herself was a banker. And it was so gruesome that it took her 10 years to recover.
So Tiffany, what are your credentials? Let's talk about a little bit about your credentials in social work, because we're talking about a serious subject matter today. And what are your credentials?
Well, I was a school psychologist for 25 years. I was with Child Protective Service 3.5 years before that. And I also have a doctorate in counseling psychology based on the topic of domestic violence, based on the play that I was in. It's called Flowers, a Thorny Romance. And what I want to discuss with you about is a bunch of films that we saw, like the one of them. My play is Flowers, a Thorny Romance. That's a play that we produced several times in New York City. And there's a lot of films on domestic violence, like one of the nicest fictional. That means fantasy. It's not real. It's called Enough by J.Lo. That's like a great fantasy about women getting revenge. But there's also a lot of them that are based on the true story. But let's talk about the fiction one first, okay?
Okay.
There's a lot of films on domestic violence out there on streaming. Like Enough is one of them. That was in 2002. And Hidden Away, Sleeping with the Enemy, Olivia Wilde is a Vigilante. That's a real great fantasy one also. I really recommend that people seeing it, even though it's a fantasy. And Dolores Claiborne, Till Death Do Us Part, and Herself. So those are the fantasy.
And how about The Burning Bed?
The Burning Bed is a real one. That's
and that's based on a true story, is it not?
Based on a true story. The Burning Bed, 1984.
And that was with was it Farrah Fawcett?
Yeah.
That's a classic. I think that movie, to me, growing up, was the first movie I identified with domestic violence.
Yeah.
And I was barely a teenager, not even a teenager then. Actually, I was a teenager.
And pretty shocking, right?
Yes. It really hits home. And because it's based on a true story, I think it was able to articulate just how raw the violence could be, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Now, we talked about statistics, right? So 30% of domestic violence is focused on men, 70% on women. But regardless of man or woman, what are the effects of domestic violence? Just like how...
Well, it's very tough on emotional. And when it comes to the women, like in less developed countries, the children under 5 don't survive not because they actually beat, because, when you beat the wife, you don't beat the kids. You don't need the wives or the kids. Sometimes it's both, but usually they ran away when that happened. What happened would be like the children under 5, they don't survive because they don't get vaccination. See, when the women are being brutally beat, they're too afraid to go outside, or they're not allowed to go outside. So it affects the longevity of their young children. That's one thing. And then traumatic brain injury affect women a lot more than men because the way we build. But traumatic brain injury also create dementia and Alzheimer later in life. And you don't know it's because of domestic violence or not until the patient is dead and you cut her brain off and you check in it. So like there's a lot of documentary that we talk about, like Psycho, like This Hit Home, and all the story like
What's the survival rate like, Tiffany, for domestic violence in this day and age? I mean,
that we don't know.
Is there a way to do it?
50% of the women who are dead out there, 50% of them was by their partner or husband. And that if they survive, a lot of time they don't mean to kill them. It just happened by accident. Like, for example, the documentary on Psycho, the men need to see the program to see what's it like or Private Violence is another documentary that explore the realities and the complexity. And they interview the women, but in the Psycho, they have the men watching it. And the interesting thing about the Psycho is, I think the 2 people who started and running it are the children, the victims. And their mother died. They saw their father kill their mother in front of them. And they create this organization to help people. And they create a documentary, and it's really, it can be really gruesome. See, it showed up when the father in jail, the son, when he got older, they went and they visit. And the son is still very angry. I think he might be older. He said, I don't want to be here. My sister wants me to be here. I'm here for my sister and my, niece and nephew. And he saw his father lose his temper to the guy or something. And he said, like, you never change. And he walked out. And so it affects one generation after the other. Even though the son, he's not an abuser, but he's still very deeply hurt by it. And the grandchildren have to visit their grandfather in jail.
Now, the goal of the abuser is not necessarily to kill their mate, right? Their goal is control, right? They want to stay in control.
It's more control. But like the documentary, this hit home is like it's revealed the invisible silent epidemic and permanent traumatic brain injury. It also indicated nearly 1 in 4 women will experience physical or sexual intimate partner violence in their life, and 1 or 7 men will too. They call it the silent health epidemic.
So the Alzheimer's and dementia is the result of blunt force trauma to the head, probably multiple concussions over and over again.
Yes, because they tend to grab the head and they would jam it against the wall or hit it against the table.
Yeah, that's something that's come to light more and more in the medical world, especially because of the technology in sports now, is concussions are said to create the higher percentage of dementia, Alzheimer's, you name it, whatever comes with it. So now with domestic violence, we're talking about battered women. 30% of the men are probably receiving emotional.
They receive physical too, but the thing is the way you build, you don't get hurt as much. Like the other man was saying that she would take a tennis racket and hit him. And I also knew someone who, the last 6 years of his marriage, he had to sleep on the couch or something because his ex would scratch his eyeball out and hit him.
Now, that's pretty, so here's my thought. I think it's pretty uncommon for most people to hear about a man in a situation of domestic violence, but statistically it happens.
It
What,
happens. They just
what
they
creates
don't talk
that?
about it or they don't go for help.
What creates a scenario where an actual woman will actually then be um, aggressive towards a man to the point where it's domestic violence? Is there any specific reasons? Is it the type of man? Is it the type of
Well,
woman? What creates that? What would allow a man to be able to be violently treated by a female?
same with women. It's the people abuser, their lack of empathy. And when we were in college, we talked with some women's study group. I was in the group that talked about violence against women too. We feel like, the women, the one who are weaker, that they do that because they know what they were doing too. That's what we're talking about. They use their gender, they take advantage of their gender and do it. And because if the man would hit them, they would know how to call the police and they would announce it. But on the other situation, a lot of times, most of the time, the women don't say anything because, these people, it's not that they hate each other. They love each other. They don't want to ruin each other's reputation. It's just a lot of times the men, like with lack of empathy, or the women too. And we don't know why they were hitting, but see, they're hitting each other. We don't know that. But when I was in college, this is really interesting. Versus to my research when I was doing my doctorate. When I was in college, they said something very interesting. They said, like, these women, they don't start to get hit until after like 30 years of marriage. And I also aware of it in one family that when I was younger, like this couple, they married for a long time and the kids were like my age, the younger kids around my age, and they have all the adults that already left home. You know what I mean? And when that happened, and the younger one would tell the mother to like get a divorce, and the mother was going to, but the older children, they heard about that. They came home, they said, how could you do that? Because they never experienced it.
So if a man is being abused by a woman, is it that the man lacked confidence in himself? Is it what would
Well,
create the scenario?
the abuser also lack confidence too. Otherwise, they would be beating on the other person.
So they both actually lack. So the abuser and the abusee both lack confidence in
Yes.
themselves, self-esteem, right?
Yeah.
Confidence in themselves.
Yeah. One of my dance colleagues told me that when she was doing a volunteer as a social worker or caseworker, she said that's like the dance that they do, but somehow the damage, it can be very rough. But versus doing my thesis, the research that I seen, all the young women are abusive, get abused, and abuse stop after they turn middle age. And I was speaking about it to my mentor. Why it stop on the women like around 40, 45? It stopped completely. Maybe these women, when they saw their mother being abused, and when they start to get abused, they realize that they're not going to take it anymore. This must be like the second generation or something. And that usually what happened, like all these documentary, they talk about it, and it can be really, really gruesome. From what I see, like for example, like we give you about the movie based on the true story. Sometimes they don't abuse, they poison, like death in a small dose. In 1995, no physical abuse. He just poisoned his wife to death for her money. So this is more than just domestic violence. This is like psychopath situation. Both of them are Harvard graduates, and he knew that she was wealthy. That's why he married her. And after they have kids or something, he started to, poison her to make sure that she's dead. And all the story, like dead before.
So let's talk about the side effects. Excuse me. Let's talk about the side effects. So if I'm being abused over time, what will happen to me as an abusee? What are the side effects? How do I live with it? So we can maybe notice these signs in people we may know every day that we don't even know are being abused. But what will be some of the signs of somebody being abused?
You can see that they have like trauma. Like sometimes it's very hard because different people, they react differently. But they don't they can be closer to people. See, a lot of child abuse victims, they can't integrate in the relationships. You understand what I mean? Like they can't stay married with someone for a long time. They get married. They can be very attractive, very desirable, but they can't stay in the
The lack of
relationship.
commitment into a relationship if you were
It's not
abused.
commitment. It's not. They want to commit. It's not commitment. It's more like integrations. Like you marry, you become one, and you have to move on forward. They couldn't do that.
What about
Because
if you've been abused starting as an adult, not as a child? How different is it when you're beginning to be abused as an adult? And what are some of those signs and symptoms of an adult being abused?
well, it's hard to say. You can usually when my experience with the parents that been abused, they need a very withdrawal or very talkative.
So one extreme or the other.
One extreme or the others. Yes, and like let's talk about some of the movies that based on a true story. Like what sometimes when the wife have the gut to leave the husband like dead before dawn, he hired someone to kill her. But guess who he hired? This is based on a true story. He hired an undercover FBI agent.
So let's look at it this way. So if I'm an adult being abused, I may be either very withdrawn or very outspoken, one extreme or the other. What about how do I deal with it? Do I result in alcohol or drugs? What are other side
Yeah.
effects of being abused? Like, what would I do if I'm being abused as an adult? What happens?
See, each person would behave differently. I don't. You might behave differently. You might not go into drugs. You might be withdrawn because you know better. Because the women that I deal with, they tend to be over talkative or withdrawn. I don't know they use drugs or not. I mean, some do and some don't. It depends on the persons.
How about other addictions? As an abusee, now the abuser is addicted to this method of control and violence. But as the abusee, do I result into any addictions? Any kind of an addiction?
No, it depends. It depends. Sometimes secondhand abuse, they see that addictions a lot of time that it's also genetic. If your parents are addicted to drugs, there's a good chance that you would be.
So there's no saying what could happen to me if I'm being abused. I'll react
Right.
differently. It doesn't mean I'll result into anything. Because my thought is wouldn't I, if I'm abused and don't feel good about myself, want to forget about that? Like I don't want to think about how I'm being abused, how I have no control in life. So how do I get that out of my head? How do I not think about it?
That's the whole thing. First, you have to leave the abuser. See, a lot of people don't like it. In certain movie, they asked the victim, "Why didn't you leave?" This is a fiction, also. The
So
judge
why
asked
don't
the
they
victim.
leave?
No, wait. The victim said, "That's the wrong question. Why don't you ask him? Why didn't he stop?" They too scared to leave. And when you watch a documentary based on a true story, like I do, you're supposed to ask the women victim that, what is it that make you afraid to leave? Usually they don't work. They're not allowed to work. And then they don't have any control over their money. They don't have their own money. They have no control over their life or whatsoever. So the controlling, it's really severe for them to leave. And then we talk about this successful story is on the movie Unforgivable, based on the true story. This couple want to create a movie based on their own life story to help others. See, but he already a nice fellow, even though he beat up his wife. And the actor was played by the late John Ritter, and he's a really good actor. You know John Ritter in Three's Company. So he hit his wife, and he saw how his children's afraid of him, and he went out and he has an affair with a woman, but she doesn't know that he was an abuser until one day he came home. He accidentally, it was by accident, tried to get to her by pushing the bathroom door, and she fell and she ended up in the hospital. She almost died. She couldn't even move. And she told her lawyer, if he doesn't go to the program, I'm press charging for attempted murder. But they're not really a couple. He should live there because he left his wife. So what happened was very difficult for him. He did. He went into the program and he graduated, and he And his children was afraid of him. So he would come and he would admit his own fault. He would say something like, it's all my fault. The family breakup is 100% my fault. I was afraid that your mother would be better than, he talked about his insecurity. And he was right about his wife. She was pretty amazing. And he stayed in the program and he became like one of the trainers that help men stop beating their wives. And years later, they remarry. And when the movie Create, they were married for like 11 years. They purposely, they want to do this to help others. But they know it's a pandemic and it's not something that anybody want to go through. And, you lose a lot of love in your life. And they got back together and they happily married. They still married. This movie did in 1996. This is after they get back together for like at least 11 years. So they were married for like another 10 years and broke up like a few years before that.
So what are the stages of,
it can, the stages.
What are the stages of domestic violence? I mean, we've talked about different stages at this point of domestic violence, but if you were to take somebody through the main stages of domestic violence to identify what it is and how it progresses from stage one on, what are the stages that you would identify with?
Well, at first, it's just a slap or two, and then they can't control themselves, and they become like a black eye, a cut. And it become like more strangulation. It become more and more aggressive. It all depends. I mean, some people, if they hit each other, they can control themselves. They go to therapy and they try to work it out. But the one that doesn't feel that they are wrong, they would become more and more aggressive. And the more you hit a person, the more provocative they become. You know what I mean?
Does the control, would the control start first with control over the person and what they do before violence? Meaning, I don't want you to have a job. I don't want you to go anywhere. I want you to stay home safe. Or is it possible violence could start right up front physically? I mean, does it normally start with just the control part and then it turns physical, or not necessarily?
Yeah. I think so. It's most of the case study I see is starting with the control form. Excuse me, Chris. I need to press the button to turn on the heater.
Well, maybe the subject has chilled Tiffany and she's cold. I know she's in her studio. And
I forgot to turn on
actually
the heater.
Warming up today in Southern California, so.
Yes, but in the studio it's cold.
Okay. We got you on ice today.
Yeah, you got me on ice today. So the first come the control, and it slowly come the abuse, and then it can get very dangerous. One of the women who worked at the alternative clinic in New York with me when I was doing this, she told me that 5 of her friends died from being abused.
Because of physical
abuse.
How about suicide? Are there any statistics on people that are being abused in domestic violence commit suicide?
No. So suicide, that's another story, but no, suicide doesn't come from
So if I'm abused, even though I feel helpless, I won't kill myself?
I hope not. But usually these victims, these people, they can't leave because they have children.
Okay.
Okay, like certain story that and they can get killed too, like Dangerous Intention, based on a true story. It was done in 1995. This woman, tried to escape the husband, right? And the mother, her family didn't help. The father helped, the mother didn't. So that didn't help. The mother didn't really believe it, even when she saw he came by her house and beat her up. She went to the shelter. And the mother knew what the shelter is, and he would come back and say, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do this." And where is she? The mother would tell him where the shelter is, and so the second shelter, the mother didn't even know, because she's not allowed to tell anyone because her mother is not trustworthy. The husband came by, he started to scream and yell at the mother. I think that when the mother knew he was aggressive, like after a long time, like usually the family and other people, they don't believe that their son-in-law, whoever abusing the victim is the abuser. They couldn't believe it because his persona and the way he came across is so impressive.
So,
However,
so what, like, we've talked about domestic violence. We talked about the different implications of domestic violence and what can happen to these people. But what can people do if they're currently living in a relationship that is violent, physical or emotional or both? What can people do to get themselves out of that? How can we help people? What can we say to those people?
there's a lot of organization now. It varies, depends state to state. There's a lot of organization. They advertise the number. If you are being hurt, you can call this number, and then they try to find a shelter for you. But you have to initiate it. See, the thing with abuse, like in certain movie, it doesn't stop there. When you go inside the home, let's say you're the social worker, you go inside the home, you try to prevent it, try to talk to them, the abuser would end up beating you up too.
So you reach out for help, somebody tries to help you, and that person also starts to abuse them. And,
Well,
and
so
my,
that's why you do
my
it in secret.
assumption is they want to get them out of the way, right?
Yeah, that's why you do it in secret.
So you'd have to physically, with that type of person, leave that person physically and go somewhere else and separate yourself from that abuser.
Yes.
But because people are afraid to take action, if a viewer is listening to our conversation now, but they're afraid to take action, what would you say to that person?
Oh, don't be afraid, because you can end up dead.
So what can we tell them as far as survival? What can they do in the meantime to work their way towards removing themselves from that relationship?
They have to call for help, and then they can be removed to a domestic violence shelters. Because, nowadays it's a lot easier than it used to be, because we have phone, and even the person don't have cell phone, they can go to the neighbor. In the old days, the woman have to go to the laundromat with a black eye. The lady there say, here's the dime. Go to the phone and call information. And they come and they got her. I saw it based on the true story of Law and Order. They come and they just remove her immediately. But she left without her child.
So
it goes right away.
So back in time, it was just calling somebody on a payphone and asking for help. So now there's organizations, shelters. That information could be gathered on the intranet. Yeah. There's advertisements. There's marketing for these organizations. Mm-hmm. So it's more readily available than it was decades ago, is what you're saying.
Much more.
But yet people will still, like any other negative relationship, still not take action. And it could go back to self-confidence, not being resourceful. They don't have a job. They don't have anything, which is where a shelter would come into play then, because a person wouldn't be able to take care of themselves if they don't have a job and any money, right? So if they do leave, they would then have to go to an organization that could fund their recovery from this, their rehabilitation back into society. Because if they don't have, now this is an extreme. I'm sure people that are professionals are still being abused. But if it's really strong abuse with control, they probably don't have much of a career, much of a job, even though you did mention 2 Harvard graduates. But I'm looking at the other extreme. You barely have maybe a high school diploma, but that's it. No experience. You don't have a lot going on.
Yeah.
You would need people to take care of you.
Yeah. But, abuse is from all fashion. It's not that you're uneducated or educated. I guess the educated one is, like always, easier for you to get a job. In the organization that I was a volunteer, one of the victims was a physician. And she said that she knew that all her patients were being abused, and she would encourage them to leave right away. But when she was being abused, she said it was difficult, but she did it.
What are the long-term mental effects of abuse like this? So there's the physical side, which some of it could heal, maybe some of it's irreversible. But even if you remove yourself from that permanently, what's the emotional and mental impacts going through the rest of your life with that?
post-traumatic stress disorder and traumatic brain injury.
So take me through.
Alzheimer, dementia, Alzheimer, later on that.
How about post-traumatic stress? So let's
Oh,
like not think about the physical effect of dementia or Alzheimer's, but post-traumatic stress. What is it? We hear a lot about it.
we can talk about that on the next show.
all walks of life. We hear a lot about military with it more than probably anything, but domestic violence.
PTSD, yeah.
Tell me what post-traumatic stress is, because I don't always think I understand what it is.
Post-traumatic stress disorder. Oh boy, it can be very severe. It's, when you went through a trauma, and it affects you, and it's really affect your life, and how you live on it. And the diagnose, that we can talk about it in our next show. The diagnosed like recently by a group of Vietnam vet and psychoanalytic in New York. It's very recent.
And once somebody removes themselves from this relationship permanently, what kind of life could they have afterwards? What have you seen?
Well, on a successful story like Unstoppable, she went out and she got a job as a receptionist, and she went to therapy. She take care of herself, and her husband take care of himself, and they would come together as friends, and that's how they got back together. They both went out and they take care of themselves. She can take care of her traumatic stress and all the horrible thing that she went through, and he had to do the same thing too. And also in the movie that recently came out with J-Lo, also The Unstoppable, that's based on a true story of the ropeless guy. He was born with a handicap, and she had him when she was very young, like 16, 17. And she got married when she got a little older. And the new husband, he made very, very much attractive to her, and he likes her, but he felt he was doing her a favor by marrying her, so he would hit her at times. And she left him. But when she left him, she do the greatest thing that you can imagine. I think she went to therapy, and then she went back to school, and she got her doctorate, and now she's working at the college level. So it depends on your drive and motivation. I mean, you can move on, male or female.
You move on and have a strong relationship with somebody afterwards?
Yes. And you take care of yourself,
What are the effects on children that have not been abused themselves but lived in a broken home where their mother or father was abused? Not directly towards them, but you're living in that environment. Most children become adults. What happens to them?
Most likely, they don't take care of themselves. They become abuser and abusee. Like someone we know, she said that her son didn't understand why they got divorced. And she said, "Oh, I love your father. I would willing to go through poverty with him." Well, that's usually what true love is. I would willing to go through anything with him. But he hit me and I couldn't take it. And I begged him to go into therapy, but he won't, because his father beat his mother, so he thought it was normal.
Is he an adult now?
Oh, yeah, they're old now. They're grown. They're around our age or older.
But the person that we're talking about was a child who asked their parent, "Why did you get divorced?" Is this child still a child, or is he an adult now?
Yeah, he's an adult now, yeah.
Do we know if he's living a life of an abuser or abusee right now?
Oh, I think his mother would not allow that, because his mother, she became very spiritual, and she take care of herself. She's on her own, but she has a good relationships with her children, and she would probably help him through it.
So for children, it's much like if you're living in a family with drug abuse, there's a good chance that you could end up being a drug abuser. So the children, if they're not directly impacted, but indirectly, is they could become adults and become abusers or abusees.
Yes, unless the children themselves recognize the drive, say like, okay, I am not going to be like that. I'm going to go out and take care of myself, so I would not hit my spouse, or I would not marry someone who hit me, or if you were abused by yours, your parents, you can have to try to take care of yourself. Okay, I'm not going to allow the pattern to happen. But when I first realized about domestic violence, I was in high school and I read one of those fashion magazines, like Glamour 17. You know what I mean? One of the Vogue, Glamour 17, and these women, they were saying that how that they were being abused, but nobody believed them. Like her family would say, him? But he's so nice. He's well-educated, handsome, successful, polite. But that's what they tend to do. Like, the sad part is no one believed them. And do you know the first domestic shelter in America? Guess what year it started? Guess what year?
What year the first domestic shelter in the U.S. started? I don't know, 1978.
Close. 1972.
72. Okay, so it's been around. The concept has been around now for 4 to 5 decades.
Right, but it's in Minnesota only. It's by women advocates. When they discuss about brain on trauma, see, the women advocates, like, it's really helping people.
What's the state of affairs then now? Let's just talk about the United States. Has domestic violence increased or decreased?
It seems like the more you know, the more it's increased, because you find out. Actually, I'm sorry, 74, because they have the organization in 72, and they have a shelter start to operate in 1974. So you're close. You're close to that.
So it sounds like domestic violence is increasing and not decreasing, despite all the resources and the acknowledgement of it in education. It's increasing?
Yeah, it's increasing.
Why do you think that is? Why is it increasing and not decreasing?
Because the truth come out. I think it's always been around, but you just don't know about it. Like, if so-and-so later on have Alzheimer and dementia at a young age, you don't know that the head was being beat up on. Like, when you hit somebody on the head, there's no scar. Like, you take someone's head and you jam them against the wall or against the table or hit it over with something. It doesn't leave scars.
So I think it's always where are we going as a society with domestic violence? We have many slowing it down?
Yeah, we slow down. We try to prevent it. I send you the prevention that I found online. I try to write it down. I send it to you. Did I?
Yes.
Yeah, you have it with you?
But other than prevention, we have prevention for a lot of things in life. We have the information, but what really is it going to take to stop domestic violence? Well, the information's out there.
I feel it's education. Education's in birth. Education's in school. Like, when I look into it, when I was doing my thesis, violence is like also bullying. You have to teach kids in preschool, kindergarten, raise awareness. Because, it doesn't start it when they marry. Sometimes before the domestic violence, intimate partner violence is also during dating too. So that's something that you have to raise awareness practically since birth, preschool, elementary school, high school.
Do you think we can completely eradicate domestic violence? Is there any way we can do that?
Well, if we raise enough awareness and we educated people emotionally and mentally, hopefully the number will be reduced and hopefully disappear. But people have to make an effort too. They have to acknowledge that it's wrong in order to make an effort. The same with verbal abuse, the same with being mean. The same with war. You have to negotiate and raise awareness to people, saying this is wrong. If you have a war, people in between you will get hurt. Let's negotiate.
Well, I think it's also like other addictions. There's information and knowledge out there, but yet we still have people addicted to drugs. We still have people in social environments with domestic violence or some kind of addiction, but we don't seem to get anywhere with it. We have more resources than ever before. So the people, once they go through an addiction or an abuse, have a place to go more now than ever, but it's not stopping the problem.
Well, it's raising awareness and education is the only thing that could stop.
Is it enough though? Because every now and then I think about all the information out there in the world, but yet people are still making the same mistakes.
Yeah.
So where does education cross the line with results? Is something that I think about with a lot of things. That with the with social media now and all the information is out there. I think that one, that could be a problem in itself, too much information. But I also think that with all the information out there, information at the speed of light, we still haven't seemed to solve many problems. We have more ways to work through it. But think about it. Have we eradicated anything completely?
Well, we have to pray on it. We have to hope
Yeah,
pray
I
on it.
mean, we
That's
pray.
why we have to raise awareness.
But we've been
This
bringing
is-
awareness now for decades on a lot of things. And I think it could hint upon more than just domestic violence, is that I remember back in the 80s when there was a big crackdown on drugs, just say no. I think there's more drugs than ever before. So this is the magical question. We have information, we have prayer, we have all the technology at our fingertips to get as much information as possible, but yet nothing seems to ever be eradicated. Is that just because we're trying to fight human nature?
Well, we have to, first of all, if you want peace, something like you want peace, you have to work toward peace.
And I'm not trying to
So
sound negative.
motivation, it's the drive and the motivation within you. That's how I see it.
Well, I mean, I agree. I think there needs to be a drive and motivation towards a solution, but I just don't see solutions here. I see a lot of people that have access to information. They do get help, but it doesn't stop generation after generation. It's just not slowing down. Or am I wrong?
That's because they have a strong destructive motivation, and that we can discuss about in another episode. The creative and the destructive motivation within an individual.
Well, that brings us to an interesting concept that we can talk about at another time, is the human psyche. I think when we think about all the animals on Earth, probably at the top of the food chain for the most intelligent but most dangerous is Homo sapien, the human being. We're one of the most intelligent creatures on Earth. We can do incredible positive things, but we can also do very negative things. We're very dangerous if we want to be. So as much as we can create greatness, we are very, very well versed on how to destroy it. The human psyche is really an incredible journey when you think about it, to be able to dive into that. And that's kind of what I'm thinking, is that we have free will to do what we want, and we have the mind to do it, which is good and bad. And it's an interesting concept. How far can we go? But here's my point. Can we get better as a society? And it just seems like we don't really, in my opinion, now I'm not using statistics. You're the statistics person. But it just seems like we have more resources for those that are already injured, if you will. But we don't seem to stop it. So what's interesting is you see all these commercials for these law firms that are making billions of dollars on, if you're being abused, if you were wronged, if you were in an accident, if you were fired, incorrectly, there's mitigations for all of this, but nothing's stopping the front end of it. Nothing ever stops. We just have more and more resources for those that are getting hurt and injured in life. But the front end part is, let's just stop it. And if we're supposed to be very intelligent people, the most intelligent animal on Earth, well, how come we can't stop it from the front end of it and eradicate it? We don't. I do know
Good point.
that, and it's going to sound a little political, in capitalism, stopping it stops income and revenue, right?
Yes,
So
probably.
in our society, we can see that whether it's domestic violence, drug abuse, health issues, right? Legal issues, is that the money is made after the damage is done. If we eradicated all the front end of everything I just said, the economy would lose billions of dollars. Okay?
Let's pray not.
So is it possible that as human beings ourselves, we're wired to maybe not stop it from happening, that we need it to happen for many different reasons, emotionally, physically, financially? So I'm playing devil's advocate here, is that, we don't, when is the end of everything that is all of negative and bad, or do we just keep on recreating it? We create
We don't
we
want
create
we don't
the
want to end everything. We don't want to end the world. We just want to end suffering.
well, no, but we want to end suffering, and we have all these resources, but the suffering doesn't end. It keeps growing, but we just create these avenues for once the suffering begins. Now you go through this process, Tiffany and Chris, but we're never stopping it. It's going to keep on going. It's like a conveyor belt, right?
Okay. So now, why don't I often invite people to do an instant offering so we can try to wrap up?
Instant
discuss
offerings. Okay, I like
Yeah.
instant offerings. Tell me about it.
Instant offering. Yep. I invite you to join the instant offering. The fragrance of this incense invites the awakened mind to be truly present with us now. The fragrance of this incense fills our practice center, protects and guards our mind from all wrong thinking.
And where did you get that from?
I don't know. I think from my family. And then, Chris, look what I got now from Healing. Bamboo moon.
The bamboo moon.
Yes. Can you discuss about it? Can you share
I
it
have
with us?
I have a reading from the bamboo moon. Now we're talking about a lot of heavy stuff today. So why don't
Yes.
we lighten it up with some spa-like words of relaxation? Healing. Let's talk about healing. Because we
Yes.
talked about people that have gone through domestic violence, and then what can they do to eventually move on and heal from it. So this is called Healing by the Bamboo Moon. So Tiffany, imagine that you are sitting amongst a lush green forest of bamboo, okay? Abundant, cool, and serene. Overhead, the moon rises, and you notice that it has grown full. Full moon. Hopefully there's no werewolves. Full moon. Soft light, serenity, and peace abounds. You become aware of vast fields of bamboo, golden in the moonlight. Boy, I wish I was there now. The bamboo moves peacefully with the breeze. Feel the peace and recognition in your heart. You don't need to do anything other than just feel it. So you have to embrace it, accept it. You belong to nature. You too shall flourish. Just feel it. Be the bamboo, Tiffany. Be the bamboo. Boy, that was pretty relaxing. Do you want to
Thank you.
tell everybody where we got that from?
We got that from the Kuan Yi Oracle, blessing, guiding, and enlightenment from the divine feminine.
I love it. I love it. And then there's another verse called Prayer Under the Bamboo Moon. If you want to read that?
Sure, right here.
Or, you don't have to, but
Oh, prayer and did you read Healing You read Healing by the Bamboo Moon,
Yeah,
right?
on page 15, and then the next verse is prayer
Yeah,
under the
Prayer Under the Bamboo Moon, yeah. Kuan Yi, you surround into the perfection of divine timing, like the bamboo shoot preparing for fast grow and the beautiful moon growing fall. Sometimes change is not so obvious, and yet growth is happening. Mm,
growth is happening. I try to read between the lines. Sometimes change is not so obvious, yet growth is happening. I think we've all experienced that in life where
oh,
we've
yes.
grown from something. We've either moved on or we're transitioning through something, but yet in life we just don't think it's happening because it's not obvious. As human beings, we want obvious. We want it right in front of our faces. We want to be hit in the face with the results. But yet in life and in nature, sometimes things are very not so obvious. Yet growth is still happening. We go to bed at night and the plant doesn't seem to be growing much, but it is growing overnight. I think we can all recall when we were children, it's like, well, we never seem to be growing up. I go to bed every night and I'm not growing up. I want to be an adult. But every night it happens. So I think we could take that verse in life, and whether we're going through trials or tribulations in life, we are going through growth and change. We just don't always know it because it could be very small and minute at times. And we wake up wondering if anything's ever going to change. But actually, it is changing as we speak.
It is. Now, Chris, you want to talk about the insult from an era before the English language got boiled down to four-letter words?
Four-letter words?
Before. You have that?
Where is that in my notes?
Okay, so I think I emailed it to you. Should I do it?
You can do it. I thought I had it, but I don't. Well, I have it, but I thought I had it in front of me, but I don't.
Okay, these are the insults are from the era before the English language got boiled down to four-letter words. He had delusions of adequacy. What a curse they. And then he has all the virtues I dislike and none of the vice I admired. Winston Churchill said that. I have never killed a man, but I have read many obituary with great pleasures. Clarence Darrow. Oh, okay, Chris, thank you so much.
Do you have any more of those? Any more of those four-letter words or verses?
Yes, I think we run out of time now, and we can continue next week.
Okay, we could do that. I know that you mentioned many films that we talked about today regarding domestic violence. Are there any other ones you would like to highlight for viewers to go check out?
Well, what I say, like Unstoppable, is a good film with Anthony Robles. It just came out and it's on streaming now.
I've always been the type of person that I watch movies 20 years later. I wait for the movie to age a little bit, so I wait 20 or 30 years. How about The Shameful Secret?
Okay.
1993.
That's a really good one. That's the one that get the judge to listen to the parents' history of abuse before deciding on child custody. And it's passed in 1990, because before that, like if the man have a good job and have a nice house and respected by his boss and his colleague, the woman will lose custody of the kids easily. So that's a good one to watch. Shameful Secret and Unforgivable is a successful one, the one I was telling you about, starting by John Ritter, and talk about how domestic violence it can be healed and progress successfully.
How about Dangerous Intentions, 1995?
Yes, Dangerous Intention. That's the one I was telling you how she got abused, and her mother's not very sensitive about it. Her mother practically sent him to where she was, and at the shelter. She went somewhere with one of the colleagues at the shelter, and the colleague husband came and killed her in front of people.
These are all based on true stories.
Based on true stuff. Dangerous Intention, Dead Before Dawn.
Yes.
Unstoppable and Unforgivable. Dead in a Small Dosage. The Burning Bed's a real classic one.
The Burning Bed classic
Documentary. Yeah,
from the
this
80s.
hit home. Yeah, this hit home is recently 2023 documentary Psycho 2019, Private Violence 2014. See, the documentary just came out like you know, more recent than others because the law for custody and things like that it actually just came out. It's fairly new.
So we could say to any viewers out there that if you're experiencing domestic violence or you know somebody that is, some of these movies really shed light on what it could be like behind closed doors.
Yeah.
Not always easy to watch, but because they're based on true stories, could be somewhat educational on just really what happens. And if you're not going through domestic violence, but you want to know more, these films can tell you more about it.
Right.
And there are resources
Teachers, social workers,
help you.
like that. You
You are-
education teacher assistant, you can raise awareness so you can figure it out and call it in. Because, you can figure out if the family going through that, the child sometimes get hit by accident, you have to call in Child Protective Service. But the kids should be living with parents who beat up on each other either.
Well, Tiffany, I'll let you wrap this up. It's been a wonderful episode 1 of season 3, talking about really important subject matter. Looking forward to our next episode, and I'll let you wrap this up.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I'm Tiffany Rothman of Filter 90211 with my wonderful and amazing co-host, Chris Long. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks, everybody.